Equilibrium, a state of perfect balance. Isn't that something we all want in our life? But what does equilibrium look like in an impact-driven space? This is where corporate social responsibility comes in, where it seeks a balance between the people, the planet, and the profit. But how does one measure the impact of businesses in all three aspects? We at Sambodhi have found stories to be the best way to capture both intangible and tangible impacts. To this end, we bring to you a conversation series called CSR Unplugged, where we are joined by industry experts and leaders across the CSRs of the nation. Today, we are joined by Gayatri Divecha, Head of CSR and Sustainability at the Godrej Group. Tune in to know more about the work that they do. Thank you so much, Gayatri, for coming here in the podcast. So excited to host you.
Thank you for having me. It's a pleasure to be here.
So Godrej's first program that I would sort of want to talk about is the Waste Management Initiative that spans across various geographical regions, that Pondicherry and Guwahati to name a few. So since it spans across geography, the people who are involved, the stakeholders, they are also different. So what I would like to understand is how Godrej ensures that while you're involving these people in the project and maximizing the impact, you're also impacting their life positively. Are there any stories of community transformation that resonate with you?
So, like you said, we run waste management programs, all solid waste management programs across, now we are in 15 different locations. Some are smaller towns, some are larger municipalities. In some cases, we've saturated completely, like Pondicherry, for example. And we've tried as much as possible also to map to our own geographical footprint. Being Godrej, for us, it's important that not only are we good neighbors, but also that the places where we are present, we are able to develop those geographies. Waste is really one of these very special sort of focus areas, unlike health or livelihoods, because waste is actually everybody's problem, right? We are all, regardless of caste, race, gender, political affiliation, public, private, whatever, we all have a stake in ensuring waste management is better run and the outcomes are improved. And we are all also, let's be honest, a part of the problem a little bit, right? So whether it's citizens who don't segregate and so on and so forth. So our programs really have evolved to, ensure that we understand what is specific about the stakeholders in every geography. And we invest a lot of time, effort, resources into understanding what makes those people in that geography tick as far as waste management is concerned. It's been difficult, but it's also been incredibly impactful because we've made that effort to understand everybody's specificities. So, for example, a place like Pondicherry is very different from Guwahati. Pondicherry is a union territory, so the way that it is governed is different. The government stakeholders involved are different. There are many more than, elsewhere perhaps. And so one has to work with everyone and ensure that everybody's challenges are being overcome. I think, as far as impact and some of the stories that, make this real, for me, the most touching ones have been really understanding waste workers' perspectives. See, it's easy to say, let's mechanize, let's automate, all of that, right? But these are people's livelihoods. They might not be very aspirational livelihoods. Let's be honest, nobody wants to be digging through trash. But they're people's lives and livelihoods. They feed their families, etc., with that. So, so involving them from the beginning of programming all the way to scale up and success has been critical, because despite it not being something that is aspirational or in many cases even dignified, to make it dignified and to bring people that dignity, that has been, amazing to see. Somebody who, was not earning enough, was not saving, had no access to insurance, health or life, any sort of subsidies or entitlements. The fact that our programs can sort of bring that about, I've met waste workers who've turned around and said, Didi, मेरे पास savings नहीं था इसके पहले, but we've made self-help groups and they are like, they do a joint sort of group system of saving. the fact that they're able to say, now I have this uniform because I have this, we have PPE, etc. in the MRFs. I have this uniform, so now my children have a sense of, I'm actually going somewhere to work. I'm not just, dealing with garbage. These are the things that really make you see, okay, wow, this is clearly, even if we're changing somebody's life, somebody's perception of their parents' livelihood and their parents' worth, that is everything. I think even understanding how, as companies, as corporates, even NGOs, whatever, we go in and we say, oh, we're making this program, but really it's the people who run it, who run those waste centers, who do the collections, that are actually teaching us how programs should be run. So, flexible, those thin plastics are quite a challenge to collect. Also, every single flexible plastic has different properties, the polymers are different, so they're all recycled in different ways. If they're not segregated according to their polymers, thickness, etc., then recycling later on becomes a challenge because they're not going to the right channels, everything's getting mixed up and then ends up in a landfill. So we said, how do we solve this problem, right? Because companies who are making products with these thin plastics, obviously the law mandates you to write what thickness it is and what properties, but waste workers can't read that. I mean, I can barely read it because it's so tiny, and also it's written in very technical language, so even, I don't understand it either, right? Then it's in English, right? So waste workers started saying, okay, help us understand the differences in these, and then their system for sorting, because you can't rely on that tiny writing in English in technical terms, is to move it by their ears. The amount, like the weight of it and the sound it makes when it moves helps them distinguish. This is in the center we run in partnership with Sampurna Earth in Goa. So the different sound it makes helps them distinguish what flexible packaging it is, and therefore how it needs to be sorted to then go on for recycling. So when you see things, when you go in with all of these assumptions that, oh, let's make this technical plan and, let's ensure everybody has decent livelihoods, etc. But then when you go down to it and you realize that you actually know nothing at all, and it's really the people who are working in the system day in and day out that will come up with better solutions than any sort of engineer, CSR head or anyone else possibly can. So that's what our experience has been.
So it's so unique, identifying and segregating waste with the sound of it.
Yeah.
It's super unique, and you don't have to train them that you need to know or you need to read, but then they have found out a solution for themselves that works for them. Yeah. It's quite unique. In another of your initiative, that's Project Embed, that works in public health. Now, behavioral change is quite crucial in public health. So I would like to understand, in this context of behavior change, since you're working with marginalized community, mostly people in hilly areas, tribal people, hard to reach people, how do you, are there any behavioral shift that you have noticed while implementing the initiative, as the target of this program is to eradicate malaria from India by 2030. So behavioral shift is important. So any stories or any shift that comes out to you?
So Embed has been a phenomenal journey of scale, and not just scale but deep impact at scale, which is rare, especially as a social sector, sustainability professional, to be able to achieve impact, at that depth, sustainable impact, and be able to scale that up has been, frankly, it's been the biggest privilege of my career. Embed was started in 2016 with the objective of partnering with the Government of India on the 2030 Sustainable Development Goal to eliminate malaria. Embed stands for Elimination of Mosquito-Borne Endemic Diseases. So we look at malaria and we also look at dengue. For us, as Godrej consumer products, it made total sense to be looking at mosquito-borne diseases, because Good Night, our brand, an iconic brand in India, is the market leader in household insecticides, and bringing the goodness of health and beauty to consumers in emerging markets is GCPL's business purpose. And so the fact that we were making a product that protects people from diseases like malaria, dengue, chikungunya, etc. In India, we felt that if anybody had to play a role alongside Government of India to achieve this malaria elimination target, it had to be us. It was our responsibility to do that. And so we started Embed in 2016 in a very small way in 2 districts of Madhya Pradesh, as a pilot, doing two things. One is behavior change at the ground level within communities that are high endemic for malaria. So like you said, tribal, extremely poor. These are 100 household villages. There's a primary school, but it's like a multi-aid level classroom. There's typically no secondary schools in these villages. So that gives you sort of the context of where it started. From 2016, when we started in Madhya Pradesh, till 2022-23, in those 7 years, with the people of Madhya Pradesh, with the government of Madhya Pradesh, with our partners, Family Health India and CHRI Path, we were able to reduce malaria in MP by 72%. So, that would not have been possible without several layers of behavior change. One level is, communities on ground understanding what is malaria, what is dengue, etc. How does one identify, how does one suspect that one has malaria, what are the symptoms, what does one do if one suspects malaria, training the ashas, enabling them to use the rapid diagnostic kits and so on, training the rest of the public healthcare system on case management and control, working with public services on surveillance and surveillance of malaria, so that if in one village there was a case or two that came up, mosquitoes don't know village boundaries, they'll fly around everywhere, right? So how do you then ensure that there are preventative actions taken in other villages? How do you strengthen the system to deliver all of this sustainably? We were able to do that in MP. In the meanwhile, we had already scaled up, well before we had reached this milestone, which was 72%. Effectively, MP moved from category 3, which is high transmission, to category 1, which is low transmission. We had started scaling up Embed before that. We had already gone to UP and Chhattisgarh. And then when we reached this milestone in MP, we knew that, okay, this is something and we can really replicate this. We had also taken on dengue in urban areas. And, a lot of the impact, again, what makes it real, like obviously all this sounds great, but it's just a number, right? What makes it real is when you go to villages and, I've sort of painted a picture of what these villages look like. You go to villages, you go to the school, every single child knows the anthem, the mosquito anthem that we've taught them. Every single child knows what to do to prevent mosquito bites and malaria. Ashas are empowered and they are able to use those kits. You have health officers from the district who are, equally sort of engaged and in the program and in its success. People recognize the Embed t-shirt. They don't know what Goodnight is, they don't know what Godrej Consumer Products is, they don't know FHI, Path, none of these, but they know Embed because there's a t-shirt, and the Embed behavior change agents are sort of everywhere spreading these messages. So of course the impact was a huge sense of pride, but again, where it became real that, okay, people recognize a t-shirt, but the test for us was really during COVID, when people couldn't go and do door-to-door, right? We do door-to-door, we do these village health and nutrition days, and these big sort of sessions. Obviously, none of that was possible during COVID. But then we had this twin health issue, right? Mosquitoes and malaria was not going anywhere just because there was COVID. And COVID came along, and everyone was stuck where they were. Behavior change agents couldn't do their jobs, right? They couldn't go out and do what they were good at. We saw in MP, in UP and in Chhattisgarh, how these amazingly driven people were then using WhatsApp. So they were singing folk songs about mosquitoes and like changing, and I didn't even understand most of it because it was all in local languages, right? But they were sending these voice notes around on WhatsApp, and on their own decided, since we're talking to people anyway about, we can't stop talking to people about malaria and dengue, and decided to include in that COVID also and the fact that they should stay safe, etc. So now, remember, these behavior change agents, they're not people like me or anybody else who's come from Bombay, Delhi, etc. and gone to live in that village and do this work. They're locals from there, which means they felt the responsibility to carry this forward regardless of it being, this program with metrics and impact and whatever, right? It's a real part of their lives and what they are able to do for their communities. And, obviously it's about the mark that they leave in the world. So when we saw that happen, we used to get, then, the not-for-profit partners would forward us those voice notes, and it was just incredible to see that nothing, even this global pandemic, stopped people from taking that responsibility for pushing forward the impact that we were collectively looking to make. So in urban areas, the success of Embed really rests on this army of volunteers that we've mobilized. We realized that, CSR funds are not unlimited. How much can we keep doing programs? How many behavior change agents will we put in? How long can we keep running this? Government also does not have neither the resources nor the human resources to have so many behavior change agents forevermore, right? Doing the same thing. So how do we sustain impact? So we realized, let's make young people responsible for sustaining impact in their communities. So we gave them roles. These are young people teenagers between the ages of 14, 15, 18, 19 to 18, 19. And they essentially they've essentially taken on roles as community facilitators, where they volunteer as part of Embed. We do incentivize them. We give them data plans for their phones, so things that matter to them. We gamify it, so those, the one who's done the most in a quarter will get, tickets to a cricket match, something cool. That's or, the one who's done the most sort of door-to-door or most successful campaigns gets, over a year, we fund a vocational education course for them. So we gave young people this platform to be part of something bigger than themselves. And again, engaging with these youth, when I met them, they would say things like, Didi, pehle people would just treat us like we were lukhas on the street, wasting time on our mobile phones. Now I've given some respect in my community because I'm doing something for the community.
One of your very unique program is Saloni and Beautypreneurs, where you vocationally train women in beauty services and make them financially independent. But over the years, much of your focus as a group has shifted more towards waste management and public health. That's Project Embed. So I would like to understand, how does the group decide which particular program to focus more on, and does monitoring and evaluation play an important role in it?
So yeah, M&E is very critical. We do baselines and midlines and endlines for everything that we do, because otherwise we don't know if we're actually making an impact. We also have very, very well articulated log frames for all our programs, logic models, which we keep revisiting to see if they need to be tweaked. So, but in terms of decision making on what we focus on, see, we started doing CSR and ESG well before it was mandatory or fashionable, right? So, 2011, we put together Good and Green, which is our commitment to building a more inclusive, greener and equitable world. All of our ESG and CSR is done under this department of Good and Green. And again, the group, even that in 2011 wasn't new for us, right? The Godrej group has a very long history of being a, responsible corporate citizen and of nation building, right? We were born in India's freedom movement. We gave back to India's freedom movement. Our first profits went to the Tilak Fund and so on. So, we very much see ourselves, we've seen ourselves as, active contributors to making the world a better place around us, and not putting, not thinking of it as business and profit or, CSR and sustainability. These are all the ands for us in between these things. So 2011, we decided to structure. We were already doing a lot of philanthropy. We were already, doing our bit as far as trying to make our operations more environmentally sustainable. 2011, we decided to really structure that and come up with a strategy. And at the time, the thinking was to take this shared value lens, which is a concept developed by Mark Kramer and Michael Porter, in the Harvard Business School. I think Michael Kramer teaches at the Harvard Kennedy School. They ran a consulting firm called FSG, and they came up with this concept of shared value, which was basically a way of looking at business and impact, both on society and environment, as interlinked and codependent. And the thinking behind shared value is that if you look at the intersection of business and planet, business and, and society, that is where you will make the most impact, because those areas will always be relevant for you as a business and also might lead to new business opportunities, right? For us, it was not about business opportunities at all, of course, because we wanted to make an impact in areas that we operate in geographically or in terms of the industries in which we're present, because then those programs would always be relevant. It wouldn't be some random CSR program. If let's say, God forbid, business went through a downturn, right? Typically, philanthropy and CSR budgets are the first to go. At the time, remember, there was no law, there were no mandates. So for us, it was that if we do something that's relevant to our business, then the business will not cut the budget because it's relevant. From a CSR perspective, the big focus for us was employability and skilling. It was a time in India where that was very much the need of the hour, right? There were jobs to be had, right? But businesses like ours were facing a huge shortage of skilled employees across the board. So we said, let's start investing in that, and that's how the Saloni program was born. Because again, Godrej Consumer Products works in health and beauty. Again, the Godrej hair dye is iconic. And so we said, okay, this is an area that we can immediately do something in, because we make this product in the beauty space, and this is an area where especially women can be skilled to run businesses, to work in salons. That salon industry was also booming. And so we started Saloni in 2012 was the first pilot. And since then, it's, in its whole life, it's reached like some 2.5 lakh women. And again, there was a journey with Saloni. The first part of Saloni was working with, was skilling young women so that they could then be placed in salons. And the main sort of focus was obviously giving them the technical skills they needed, also the life skills, etc., to be able to get a job and keep it, and placement linkages. We then, around 2016-17 realized that by then a lot of other players were doing the skilling for salons. The salon market in India had exploded, right? There were so many different, chains of salons, and everybody was doing their own training for people that they wanted to employ. So it became a little less relevant to, have this. We don't run salons, so it's not like we could employ those people. So it became a little bit less relevant for us to do this, because anyway, people were getting retrained or had to do, the specific type of course that they were required to for a job. We also simultaneously sort of read the market very well and realized that, all these chains and big salons had exploded, but also this small salon setup, like a solo woman entrepreneur running a beauty business from her home, that had also exploded alongside. And we realized that these women were not trained. Okay, these were not young women. They were typically mothers already, right? There was, their husbands would be working, and theirs would be a supplementary income. And they sort of just bric-a-brac had picked up this work. So we said, what if we work with these women, we call them beautypreneurs, and we make them run these businesses as businesses, not as some livelihood activity. Teach them the things like business management, profit, loss, revenue, cost, what are these things, we gave them logbooks. So it was like a 1-year course where we did two things again: upgraded their technical skills through, modules, and worked with them on entrepreneurship and business skills, along with a year of hand-holding, because the salon business is a seasonal one. You're not going to have, in, April, you're not going to run the same kind of revenue as you will in, let's say, October, just before Diwali or in the festive season. So we stuck with them for a year to understand the cycles, and so that they could also understand the cycles of their business. And, handheld them through that. And again, huge impact, because these women were now more than doubling their family income, right? As all of the data and evidence globally suggests, when you invest in women, and especially in women's livelihoods and incomes, they invest most of that back into their families and their families' well-being. So as a result of these beautypreneurs having growing disposable income, they were investing some back into their businesses, they were investing in their kids' education, they were investing in their daughters. So that was an amazing knock-on effect to see. And again, we were able to understand how to balance. We did, at a point in 2016 when we started Beautypreneur, we continued Saloni, and then the priority shifted more towards Beautypreneur. We still continued to do Saloni when there was demand because we had all the resources to be able to do it, and grew Beautypreneur till COVID hit in 2020. And that again was a turning point for Beautypreneur, because we struggled from 2016 when we realized that this was working and women's businesses were growing. We had to convince women to keep investing more back into their businesses. At some point, you can't do that without some form of external financing. But again, these are women who had never run businesses before. They didn't have credit scores. They had never taken debt. They did not want to take debt. So convincing them was difficult. COVID was a turning point for that, because because obviously their businesses were hit. So they needed they didn't have that working capital. When they were finally able to reopen, they didn't have that working capital to reinvest in their businesses. So they became open to the idea of taking on financing. And we started, along with Samhita, these zero interest loans. We call them returnable grants, because there's no interest. But we made sure that regardless of no interest, we got an NBFC partner involved, because that meant those women would have credit scores and could then later borrow as much as they wanted to. Again, everybody thought this was crazy and that we would have zero repayment, right? We had 92% of women repay those loans. So, I would say that's a smashing success rate, far better than most of the banks, but 92% of women repaid those loans. And it goes to show that if you invest in women, regardless of how difficult it is, and regardless of how many barriers culturally, etc., there might be, women will exponentially grow if you give them time, patience, the inputs that they need, and the surety that you have their back. So that's really been the story of Saloni, to go from skilling young people all the way to really making women entrepreneurs, business owners, and employers of other women in their salons. But of course, like everything, right, there's a threshold that one reaches beyond which it becomes a little difficult to scale. It's not model like Embed. Health runs the same way everywhere. Mosquitoes, malaria, dengue is the same everywhere. It's not specific to certain locations like waste is. With Saloni and Beautypreneur, the issue is it's not a model that can go to rural areas, because if you train a lot of women, they are essentially their own clients. But if everybody is trained to be a beautypreneur, then where are their clientele coming from, right? So it's a bit challenging to scale it to rural areas or to very small towns. We also realized that in urban areas, already these small salons had grown, but then they grew even more. And then with the advent of things like urban clap, those became far more attractive opportunities for women. And so, the whole model became a little less relevant to continue in the same way. So we still do knowledge partnerships because we have an expert team. We have, I would argue, sure, call me biased, but I would argue we have the best curriculum out there, both for technical skills as well as business skills. We're working with a couple of governments for them to take it on now as part of their vocational training offerings. So it still exists, but in a very different format to what it once was.
Across all the discussion that we had right now, different projects, what really stood out was that Godrej Group really looks forward to collaboration. So, what is your opinion on how important is collaboration in the CSR space with different stakeholders? And do you see that companies can come together, leveraging their own efficiency and scaling it up in terms of collaboration?
Yeah, see, I think it is totally required. It is the future. I mean, it should actually already be our present. We, like I had like I talked about, a lot of our programs are in collaboration with different stakeholders, civil society, government, etc. Very few are in collaboration with other companies. It's not because we don't want to collaborate with other companies. For us at Godrej Industries Group, CSR and ESG, these are not areas in which we compete, right? Because that would be totally counterproductive to why CSR and ESG exist. So nobody is our competitor in terms of corporates in these two areas. We saw a lot of companies coming together during the pandemic, and I would have hoped that would continue. Of course, there are companies we continue to collaborate with, Mahindra Realty being one. We work on this program for construction workers, where we enable access to entitlements and social security. In India, there's something called the Board of Construction Welfare, which is, each state has its own, and all construction companies and real estate companies pay a cess into the Board of Construction Welfare. Those funds are earmarked only for the welfare of construction workers who are migrant, extremely vulnerable. We saw what happened during COVID. And it was sad that had to happen for us to realize as a nation that this is the reality of this group of people. So this is a population that needs those benefits, and they exist for them. However, they don't know that they exist. They have to register with the BOCW. They have to apply for various schemes, which could be building a house in their villages, or education, health insurance, life insurance, accidental cover. I mean, the list is endless. It's one of the most comprehensive social security packages available. But the sad bit is most construction workers who it's for don't know it exists. And so we decided that we should be playing a catalytic role in this, and not replicating and not sort of undermining things that already exist. There are government funds. Same with waste, right? We try not to build infrastructure, etc., for which there are government funds available. There's no point, undermining public systems that are well designed. So we've been working on BOCW, access to entitlements for construction workers, for a long while. And again, it's such huge leverage and bang for buck, because for an investment of anywhere between 750 to 1500 rupees per worker, depending on whether you need to also get an Aadhaar, bank account, etc., how many schemes, for that sort of investment, you can get 4 or 5 times in terms of entitlements back to the worker. So, we started working on this before COVID. During COVID, it was a crisis for construction workers. We very quickly reached out to companies that are like-minded in the real estate space to do the same thing, and they did it, right? We worked very closely with Mahindra Life Spaces, Tata Realty, etc., on mission BOCW, as we call it. And if we could do it then, we can certainly continue to do it in other areas. Even in manufacturing in India, there are these economic zones where manufacturing takes place, right? There is no reason for companies in those areas not to collaborate. One company cannot possibly solve for all of the issues, or even just a water issue, right? So there is every reason for us to come together and collaborate more. The law actually allows us to. The CSR rules clearly state that companies can collaborate and partner with one another as long as both boards are aware and approve. So really, I feel that the time has come. We showed we could do it during COVID, and the time has come that we do it more. So it's not easy. It requires really putting egos and agendas aside and focusing on the impact that we wish to create. But I think that it's worth doing, and I think that it's our responsibility somewhere to take the impact we've been able to make so far in whatever 10 years of CSR that it's been now, and multiply it exponentially, and we'll only be able to do that if we come together.
Thank you so much, Gayatri, for your time. It was so nice having this conversation with you.
Thank you for having me.
Institutionalized giving is a complex space, and today's episode with Gayatri gave us much to ponder on. We remain steadfast in our efforts to bring you many more insights. Stay tuned for our next episode.